Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm finally going to start armoring up the Jeep. I've got some armor from Moto-Built that I'm going to put on and I'm pretty excited about. So let me show you what I got. So the first thing I've got here is Moto-Built's aluminum half door armor. Now they do have steel as well. I always opt for aluminum when I have the option just because I like how light it is. And then I also have Moto-Built's aluminum tub armor, which this is kind of funny because one of the first incidents I had where I did body damage on my Jeep, it put a big crease right where this armor goes. So I've wanted to get this for a while and I'm happy to have it now. This will kind of help cover up my past sins. So this armor is not very cheap. The aluminum armor is always a little more expensive anyway, but the half door armor was around $400 and the tub armor was around $150, I think. So with shipping and tax and everything, you're looking at around $600 just for this armor here. Let me throw this out there in the beginning. Also, this armor does require drilling holes in your Jeep. You'll have to drill holes in your half door and you'll have to drill holes in your tub to install it. If you're not into that, then this armor probably isn't for you. This armor also does not come finished. It's just bare aluminum. It has the print on it from the manufacturing, which I found some very strong nail polish remover wipes that off pretty good. And you'll have to paint it up. Right now, I'm not going to worry about painting it. I'm just going to get it installed and then I can easily take it off and paint it later. I'll probably paint it black to match my metal cloak armor. All of the holes are nice and recessed in there. That way the bolts don't stick out. They'll sit nice and flush with the armor. So this is the hardware it came with. You get the rib nuts and some stainless steel screws that go into them. You will want to purchase a Rivet Tool, which I have right here. I bought this on Amazon for I think around 70 bucks. It comes with multiple fittings and a bunch of different size rib nuts with it. So I think it's going to be well worth the purchase, especially for me because I plan on putting all this armor on. So I'm going to use it a lot in the next couple days because all the armor I'm putting on uses rib nuts. I'll try and give you a quick little demo how this works. The rib nuts that came with my Moto-Built armor are 5/16 by 18. So this is the fitting you'll want to grab. In here you have two pieces. You'll want to start with this one and you'll want to grab your tool. So assuming your tool is pretty similar to mine, you have this little sleeve inside that you can push down like that. So if you depress that and hold it down, you take this piece, you'll use the shorter threaded side with kind of the nut head on the bottom, and you'll put that through the top and screw it in. Once you have that tight, you can release that sleeve, and that sleeve will keep this from unthreading. Next, that other piece you had, it screws into the top to keep everything in place, kind of keep any play out of this. And then once you have that tightened down, the next thing you would do is take your rib nut and you would screw that on. You would want to open the jaws like this and screw it on the rest of the way. And then you'll notice you have tension. Don't pull on it yet. You'll ruin your rib nut if you do. So the next thing you'd want to do is make sure you have your holes drilled just big enough to fit these rib nuts in there. So when you have those holes drilled, you'll want to push this in, keeping pressure forward on it while you depress both the handles, and then that'll squeeze it in there and give you this kind of mushrooming on the other side, which locks the rib nut in place. So once you have the rib nut set in the metal that you've put it into, you will obviously no longer be able to just kind of unscrew the rib nut. So you have to use this handle down here, and this will allow you to unscrew the thread from the rib nut and then be able to remove your tool from it. So it's as simple as that. It's an extremely easy tool to use, not a whole lot of science to it, and I'm pretty excited to have it, honestly, because there's a few times I could have used something like this in the past. But hey, that's why I make these videos, to learn a little myself and to kind of teach other people things I didn't know before I made the video. So I did go ahead and already mark my holes on there. It was kind of a two-person job. I guess you could have clamped it, but I just kind of held it and lined it up where I wanted it, and then I had my fiance mark all the holes for me. So those are where my holes ended up. Say goodbye to my star, guys. Don't worry, I already ordered a new star if you're fond of it, so I'm waiting for that to come in the mail and I'll stick it on that. So real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and center punch all my holes, and then I guess I'll get to the drilling which kind of hurts my heart. I always hate putting holes in my beautiful Jeep. Okay, so I went ahead and drilled a small pilot hole in all of them. I just used a real small drill bit, which this is all that's left of my drill bit. It broke off in that last one, but it kind of fell off inside. I don't know why it caught and just snapped, but no big deal. So after you center punch, start with a small drill bit and make sure you get it in the center, and then start stepping it up from there. Don't try and start with a big bit, otherwise you can end up walking all over the place and your holes won't line up. Not perfect, but I think it's within the margin of error. So I'm up to a 1/2 inch drill bit now. I've stepped it up, I think, one more time off camera. I don't want to bore you guys with a bunch of drilling. 1/2 inch is the biggest drill bit I have, and it's like the exact size. So I might have to cheat a little and kind of wallow out the hole with this drill bit to make them fit, but we'll see. So it's bigger than a 1/2 inch, and even me kind of wallowing out the hole like that, I don't know if I want to get too crazy. It's still not fitting. But a couple things I did notice is this area up here, the metal is much thicker, so that was a lot harder to drill. And down here, all the other holes, it was nice and thin like that. One other thing I noticed is right here on these two holes, you have that second wall in there. And I don't know if that's going to be deep enough to fit that riv nut in there. So yeah, and that's what broke my first little bit. It kind of jumped through and grabbed in there and snapped it. So that mystery's solved. The lengths I am going to avoid driving like 10 minutes up the road to buy a new drill bit is insane. So I wallowed out the holes enough with that 1/2 inch bit so they fit. And then on these, I drilled through that second layer of metal in there, and then I can't really move the drill bit to get that because it's making these holes way too wide. So what I'm doing is using a punch, which I don't know if you guys can see in there. Yeah, you can kind of see. I'm using, not a punch, a chisel, and it fits in there, and I'm hitting and cutting the metal in multiple spots and bending it in. So now this fits. I mean, it's ridiculous. You guys should buy the right size drill bit. I'm mildly embarrassed to even show this. I just don't feel like quitting to go up the street to buy a new bit. So because of my poor method of doing this, some of these holes are a little loose. Like this one is definitely a little looser than I would like for this. Hopefully it still holds well. It's got a lot on here. A lot of them are much more snug, so I don't think it'll be too big of a deal. But again, if you use the correct size drill bit, this would not be an issue. One other thing to mention real quick is where you drilled all these holes, you're gonna wanna paint around the hole if you wanna try and keep it from rusting. All right, that was a weird way to do it, but it looked like it worked. So I'll let that dry for a couple minutes and then I'll start putting in the riv nuts. So I'll show you how to do the half door armor and then the tub armor on one side of the Jeep, because it'll be identical on the other side. So there's no point in making the video twice as long as it needs to be. but then I'll go ahead and finish the other side, and I'll give you guys a look at the armor on both sides of my Jeep so you can see what you think. I've got my Rivet tool loaded with the correct end, so now I'm going to add a rib nut onto it. And now I'm going to go and start rib nutting all the holes. Alright, first one done. One thing I will say is that when I did the test one, I used one of the really small ones that came with this, and the ones that came with the armor are much bigger and thicker than the ones that came with this gun, and it's a lot harder to squeeze. I mean, it wasn't impossible, it was just I wasn't expecting it, so when I went to squeeze it, I was like, ooh, did I do something wrong? Nope, just had to put a little manhood in it. Alright, so this is going to be the moment of truth where I see if I can get all the screws lined up, the holes I made. I'm hoping I can. We'll see. Part of the trick will be not tightening anything down, just kind of getting a few threads started on each one and then tightening them all down together. If you tighten one down, then you've got no room to play. And sometimes when you leave them kind of loose, you can use the screw to force themselves into place. Definitely pretty tight. Okay, so I've got each of them at least started by a couple threads, so I think I'll be able to force it all together. One other thing with this being stainless steel hardware, I'm going to put anti-seize on each one before I tighten them down permanently. Now that the half door armor is on, I'm going to start working on the tub armor, and the first thing I need to do is to peel off my badges of honor and then peel off this little guy, and I'm going to save them because I'm going to probably then try and glue or epoxy them back onto this. I like where they're at. I want to keep them and display them, and yeah, so it should work out pretty good. Alright, I got all that peeled off now. I might clean this up with like some Goo Gone or something later to try and get the sticky bits off, but I don't think it matters because it's going to be covered anyway. So the next thing I'm going to do is take that sheet of armor and put it up here and trace all the holes out. But to do that, that armor uses these two existing bolts. So I'm going to remove these and then use those to lock it in place. So that way I can mark the rest of them and get everything lined up perfectly. One thing I've always seen is people strip these or break these. I believe they are Loctited in, probably like the red Loctite. So I'm going to heat it with a torch first, which should help melt and release the Loctite, and then I'm going to get it with an impact. This is a T40 Torx bit, so yeah, that's the plan. Okay, that worked like a charm. This came right out. I find it's usually easier if you know that it's going to be tough to start with some fire and warm everything up, because if you start with an impact and a bit and you start to strip it out, it'll just be even harder later on. So if you start with the fire and loosen it up and then hit it with the bit, it usually comes out pretty easy. We'll see how it works out, but my first impressions of this with those two bolts holding it in, not a great fit. You can see it's sticking out really far down there, and these aren't even all the way tight up here. So, I mean, it's got the flex, you can make it work, but I don't know, that's just unnecessary tension that'll be on those screws later. It's also, with those two using the pre-existing holes, it doesn't really line up great. I mean, it doesn't follow the body lines perfectly. It's kind of a gap down here. It's kind of hanging over up there. It doesn't really line up great here. It kind of goes over the Jeep fine, I guess. And you can adjust it a little bit, and then it just messes up the alignment elsewhere. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not great. Oh, and then up here, I don't know how much I love this kind of, it's rounded, but this is squared off, so there's a big gap in there too. It just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't look amazing. I mean, it's not bad, but yeah, I don't know. I would prefer if they would have maybe kind of rounded this a little bit or something. I don't know. And for that, maybe somewhere around here, I might try and just put in a tiny bend to make it contour a little better and stick to the Jeep a little better. Or maybe I'll just do a little bend up here. That way that goes in, so everything else will be flush. I don't know, we'll see. Okay, so I've got the two factory bolts holding it in place. So I've kind of aligned it right where I want it, where it looks like it lines up best with the body lines. So I'm gonna hold it flush up against the Jeep now, and I'm gonna take a Sharpie and mark all the holes so I can start drilling. You could also just kind of leave it up here, maybe take your door off and clamp it down to the body, and then you could mark and drill the holes through the metal while keeping it there as a template. I'm just gonna take it off and get it out of the way and do it like I did this armor on the door. So same thing as we did with the door, I'm gonna start center punching all the holes I marked, and then I'll drill them out with a pilot hole and start stepping it up to bigger bits. So now I just have to go in there like I did yesterday, and I'm gonna spray some paint into a little cup and use a glove, and I'm just gonna smear it on there to paint all the bare metal. And then once that's done, I'm ready to start putting in the rib nuts. Okay, the paint's all dry. Time to start putting in the rib nuts. Okay, let's hope everything lines up. Scared me. All right, it's a little off, but honestly, it looks pretty good. It kind of sticks out a little bit more up here than it does down here, but you're talking like a 1/16 of an inch, and most likely no one but me is gonna notice that. So I'm pretty happy with it. So I'll give you guys a close-up look at it here real quick. And also, when I was at Lowe's getting the drill bits, I stopped to look at paints to decide what I was gonna use to paint it. And right before I bought the paint, I remembered I have some Raptor liner left. So I think I'll end up Raptor lining this. I think it'll look good. It'll kind of have some texture like what the Metal Cloak stuff does. It'll be more texture than that, but I think it'll blend okay. And it looks good in the tub, so I'm gonna give that a try. It should be a little more rugged than paint, and it should be easier to patch up, I think. Just spray another coat on top of it once it gets all scratched up. But yeah, so now I'm gonna move on and do the other side, and then I'll give you a look at that side too. But this seemed to be a little easier to do than that. I mean, just less holes to drill to line up, and maybe I got a little better at doing it on this one. Now I'll move on to the other side, and I'll get back with you guys when it's finished. Not sure if you guys could tell what was happening in the time lapse, but when I went to tighten this bolt in, it got kind of tight and I kept going, which I probably shouldn't have. I don't know why the threads in that seemed a little messed up. Maybe they got a little bent when I crimped it down, but once I started to keep tightening it, it started to spin that riv nut behind there. So then I couldn't get the bolt back out. So I had to cut the head off the bolt with a Dremel, and then I had to cut like the flange part off the riv nut and then just push it into the door. And maybe I'll be able to get that out later. If not, it's just gonna live inside my door. So then I kind of hammered it flat because it had kind of pulled out on the door metal a little bit. And then I put a new riv nut in there and it was a little loose. So I gave it a little extra crank and then I got this one in. Other than that, this side went a lot smoother. The holes lined up a little better and I thought it was going pretty great, and that happened. It's always something, but I'm just glad I got it fixed because I was going to be really sad if I couldn't get that to work. Everything lined up. The door, the metal seems a little higher here, but I kind of was going more for body lines because those holes I don't think are cut out too perfect, but everything else looks pretty good. I was trying to keep the same gap all the way around instead of trying to center it on like the handle. Okay, so I've got this side done now too. It wasn't terrible. I think I'm getting better at it. So that's it for the Moto Build armor. One thing I do want to point out that I just realized is the hardware they give you, the bolts, actually are the same thread pattern as what comes out up here, so you don't have to reuse those old bolts. I was thinking they felt a little short and they were barely biting, and these are longer. So yeah, it looks a lot better using the new hardware. One other thing I want to point out is that I checked it, and the metal cloak rock rails here will work with that without having to trim it. It fits up perfectly and it looks pretty good. So I'm pretty excited to get those on. I'm gonna go ahead and end this video, and then I'll probably immediately start working on adding my metal cloak armor, which will be a separate video. So make sure you go check out that video next, guys. Hey, congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, please think about subscribing to the channel. And if you are subscribed, make sure you go watch some other content because I am filling up YouTube with Jeep TJ content.